Welcome to the Bettis Musgrove Show, the podcast where personal injury legal expertise meets real-world advice to empower and protect you. Join us as we delve into the critical aspects of personal injury cases, break down legal jargon into actionable insights, and share essential safety tips to help you navigate life's unexpected moments. And now, here are your hosts, Spenser Bettis and Ben Musgrove.
All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the second podcast of the Bettis Musgrove Show. As always, I'm Ben Musgrove. This is my partner, Spenser Bettis. We operate a personal injury law firm in Cumming, Georgia, and we've created this podcast to give the general public just a deeper insight into what we do for a living and what exactly personal injury is. But without further ado, let's kick this thing off, partner. Good afternoon. How are you?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So we got our first podcast in the books a couple of weeks ago. Had some pretty good viewership come out of it.
Did.
Everybody seemed to enjoy what they saw. I got some nice feedback from folks. A lot of people tell me what they kind of wanted to hear out of the podcast, which I thought was cool. And that mainly being that they want to hear war stories, obviously successes and failures we've had. They want to hear some do's and don'ts about what to do about personal injury and then just things like that. So I kind of thought today we would jump into that and give people sort of what they want and touch on those topics a little bit and really follow up with some things that we talked about in the first podcast. And what I thought we'd call this is the three biggest misconceptions about personal injury as we see it, with those three big misconceptions being, one, where the money in a personal injury claim comes from, two, that personal injury lawsuits and claims for that matter are not frivolous, or I guess the misconception being they are frivolous, we're going to say they're not, and then three, any lawyer with a bar license can handle a personal injury claim just as good as the next. I think in my years of practice, and you may agree or disagree, those are the three biggest things that I hear people talk about all the time. So absolutely, we touched on those a little bit in the first one. Like I said, why don't you kick it off? I know you sort of touched on it more than anybody in terms of, when we handle a claim, our goal is not to hurt anyone, but to help everybody. So
Right. Yeah, that's something that I think resonated with a lot of people last time that we talked. First of all, I mean, most people believe that an at-fault party is going to be somehow financially responsible. And that's possible, but extremely unlikely and pretty uncommon.
Yeah.
And I think people are starting to understand. Certainly, our last podcast kind of let a lot of people in on that. But in the vast majority of cases, the individual doesn't pay anything out of pocket necessarily. The at-fault individual for the injuries that they cause. This is especially true to car wreck. That's why we have insurance. Most people have liability insurance. And most at-fault parties, a lot of times, at least hopefully, have at-fault insurance coverage on vehicles, homes, businesses, and their property.
Right.
And a lot of people carry umbrella policies, which is great. Certainly suggest to get those if you don't have one.
Yeah. In Georgia, it's known, I think, that the minimum required liability insurance is $25,000. The state requires anybody using Georgia roads to have that much coverage. And that's just for the injuries. That doesn't include the property damage, which get conflated a lot of times. But so $25,000 in just bodily injury coverage, property damage being an entirely separate claim. I think the problem that we see, especially in 2024, excuse me, with inflation and everything else, is that $25,000 just doesn't get you very far. Especially when you're talking about medical expenses. I mean, by the time somebody takes an ambulance to the hospital and gets one MRI, they've gone $25,000 before they even know it. And I think the legislature is starting to see that a little bit, and we're seeing them talk about it more. We may see some changes in terms of increasing coverages, but right now, $25,000 is the minimum. I encourage everybody out there to carry more than $25,000 worth of coverage, because then you could be on the hook for anything in excess of that. But
right.
That is the minimum.
Yeah, and right now we're not aware of any requirements for that on property, but I mean, most lenders require it. Most landlords require a renter's policy. So there's a lot that's open there for premises cases and liability associated with that as well.
Sure. And you mean that landlords and mortgage companies requiring liability coverage?
Correct. Yeah.
Cool. And in most cases, I think it's important to note that so long as an individual has insurance, so long as they've stayed up with their monthly premiums, they haven't done anything to void the policy, like have somebody who's, say, an excluded driver, somebody that's known to be just a terrible driver, and the insurance company says, no, they're not allowed to drive your car. So long as they haven't done something like that and there is a policy in place, that insurance will kick in to cover them for any mistakes that they may make.
Right. And that kind of brings us to another point. A lot of people don't realize that they have policies in place that will help with their injury costs, and that's their own policy.
Right.
This is what is the uninsured, underinsured motorist in terms of motor vehicle accidents. But that just creates additional avenues for funding that people may not be aware of. And, there's often a pretty big concern about making claims for that. But it's something that's really great to have there and have available. So,
no, man, that ties in perfectly to just the fact that there are multiple avenues that somebody may find some source of funding for in an accident, whether it's a car accident, slip and fall, or whatever. Kind of like I touched on just a minute ago with the auto insurance, there should be at least $25,000 in injury coverage to protect you in case you are hurt, cover any medical expenses, lost wages, and some pain and suffering, hopefully. There may be health insurance that's in place if somebody has health insurance, whether it's Medicare or Medicaid, private insurance, workers' comp, TRICARE, a lot of different areas where health insurance may kick in to help offset some of those expenses. And in some cases, I won't get into the weeds too much, but the health insurance company is entitled to be paid back from a settlement. A lot of people, like you said, they carry the the uninsured motorist coverage that can kick in to cover excess. And then you see a lot of people who have what's called MedPay on their policies. Right. MedPay is just simply exactly what it sounds like. It's a part of your policy that's there to pay for medical expenses. Really no questions asked, no harm, no foul. A lot of people have $1,000. Some people have $5,000. That's just money you can use to cover any medical expenses that you may have. And those are just a few examples, really, to show that there are multiple different buckets to kick in or to tap into. Mm-hmm. And if you hire a personal injury attorney that knows what they're doing, they'll know where to go look for those buckets so that you can get into them.
Right. I feel like we do a good job of looking for that and making sure, that we identify every avenue of coverage. But yeah, that's a hot topic. Everybody always says, I don't want to make a claim against my own insurance. They may not understand that uninsured motorist coverage or underinsured is open to them. They've been paying for it for years with insurance company X, and that's what its intended purpose is for. I think a lot of people get confused around that, but it's a really good thing to have. I certainly suggest that anybody get it. But that's something where, if anybody takes something away from this show, it's, hey, that's a good thing to have. Make sure you use it. And if it's there for you.
Yeah. Call your insurance agent today and ask them if you've got coverage.
Yeah.
And if you don't, get it. Because if somebody hits you that has $25,000 worth of coverage and you break your leg and have to have surgery to fix it, you're going to need more than $25,000 worth of coverage.
Right.
And if they're only carrying the minimums, chances are they don't have anything asset-wise to protect. So that's why they have the minimums. And you're going to be left holding the bag to fix that broken leg. So, yeah, call your insurance agent. Make sure you got coverage. I recommend $250,000 worth of coverage. It's really not that expensive to add it on, but check into it and see if you have it. And the MedPay. If you don't carry health insurance, or maybe you just got like catastrophic type health insurance, pick up a little MedPay. Also very inexpensive. Can really help cover some of those expenses. And like you said, in terms of the hot topic, I get it all the time too. I mean, people know I've been using State Farm for 25 years. I've never had to use my policy. I don't want to tap into that. And it's like, why? You've been paying $100 a month in some cases for this insurance. Why would you not want to use it when you need it? And I think what people need to understand is there's no harm in using it.
Right.
Georgia has a no-fault statute, which essentially says if you have an insurance policy and you're not at fault in the accident, you need to use that insurance policy. The insurance companies are allowed to increase your premiums for using what you've been paying for.
Exactly.
That's what it's there for. Again, no harm, no foul. If you've got it, use it. Keep in mind that only applies to a wreck. When you're not at fault. If you are at fault, there's no statute like that to protect you, and you're sort of at the mercy of whatever may come. But also understand that uninsured motorist coverage, and a lot of people don't know this, is very expansive. So you may have coverage. You think I've got this one policy that covers my truck. It's a policy, and I've got $50,000 worth of coverage. But what people don't realize is you may be able to tap into other vehicles in the home. If you have relatives that live with you and they live in your house, you can tap into their coverage sometimes. So there's multiple different ways to stack these policies to really expand the funding that's available to you in a wreck.
Right.
I think about this story 3 or 4 years ago. I represented a young man down in South Georgia he was driving to work with his friend one day, and they were coming over a hill, and the sun was in their eyes, and the friend just really wasn't paying attention. And there's a truck that had stopped on the side of the road to help another vehicle, and the friend just blasted this truck. I'd say they were going 75, 80 miles an hour when they hit it. Caved in the front end of my client's vehicle that he was a passenger in, pushed the engine basically up into the cab of the truck. I think he broke 6 vertebrae, lacerated his spleen, broke both of his hips. He was in a lot of pain, had some pretty significant injuries. Ended up getting flown over to Macon to the hospital to get treatment. And at the end of the day, he had like $300,000 plus in medical expenses. He did not have health insurance. He didn't own a car. He didn't have any car insurance. So there was really, just looking at it, you're thinking all we got is the insurance on the friend's truck, which is only $30,000 in this case. But we started looking into it a little further. My client still lived at home with his parents, and his grandparents lived in the house as well. Parents had a Geico policy. Grandparents had a State Farm policy, or a couple of them, and they were pretty big policies. And so we were able to, after talking to them for a while, because they immediately said, no, we don't want to use our insurance. Had to go through the no-fault statute and explain it to them. And once we got it all stacked together, we got a very nice settlement for him. Completely covered his medical expenses, put a lot of money in his pocket to help with his future pain and suffering, future medical care that he's going to definitely require. And it was a good day, but it's only because I knew where those buckets were and to go find the buckets and look into them.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect example. One source of funding there, we have insurance and multiple policies, and all of it was insurance money. Nothing was taken by an individual party.
Sure.
Money rarely ever comes from the actual at fault party. It's usually just that we'll call it a buffer of insurance, and there really was no need to take it any further.
Yeah. I think that story kind of ties in perfectly as a segue for our second misconception, and that being that so many people feel like personal injury claims or lawsuits are frivolous, or that the results are frivolous. I hear it all the time. Ambulance chasers, money for nothing. You guys are taking advantage of the system. There's so many different derogatory things, I guess, that are said about the specialty that we're in. But, and I understand to some degree. I think usually these opinions kind of come from two different places. One is probably being said by somebody who's never been injured because of somebody else's mistake. They don't understand how bad back pain hurts. Or it's tied to somebody who's in the insurance industry or owns a big business and just doesn't want to have to purchase that insurance or supply that insurance or come out of pocket as an insurance company to pay for those types of injuries. And I think the problem there, this misconception really may come from the mass marketing that we're just inundated with every day. You drive down the road, you see how many billboards from different attorneys saying, I won this person $3.5 million for a leg injury, and I won this person $2.2 million for a back injury. And you see it, you hear the commercials constantly. I understand why these attorneys are doing it. This is a very competitive market that we practice in. There are, a lot of lawyers that do this, and there are just a few, or not as many car wrecks, I should say, to go around. So I get why people are touting these big results. But what I also know is that the state bar highly regulates what we're allowed to do in advertising. So if you see these numbers on a billboard or a commercial, you can rest assured that that number was actually obtained because they're not allowed to lie about the results. But I think the misconception from it all comes from people seeing these numbers and they automatically assume that somebody got $3.5 million for a leg injury in a fender bender, and they weren't really that hurt. They just got this stupid number for something they didn't deserve. And I really think that couldn't be further from the truth. Anytime, I just about bank my entire life savings on this, anytime you see a 6-figure or 7-figure settlement verdict, whatever the case may be, I think you can rest assured that somebody in that case was pretty badly hurt, or in a lot of cases even killed if the number gets up there into the millions. A claim with minor back pain or whiplash or just, some seatbelt burn from a rear-end collision, it's not going to see $100,000. Certainly not going to see $1 million. But you see these billboards for everybody just automatically saying to it.
Yeah, I hear it all the time as well. I don't think what everybody realizes is that these insurance companies are very sophisticated. They have access to software that's just going to help them understand the value of a case, the true value of a case. So yeah, there's zero chance they're going to pay $1 million for a $10,000 case. They're going to evaluate it. And they'll use that technology they have to determine that number is appropriate. Or 12 members of the community, a jury, heard the case and decided that number was appropriate. Either way, they're not frivolous. They're valued, and the parties involved understand the value of them most of the time.
Yeah. I think that's perfect, especially right now, given, elections coming up. I know I get emails all the time from my representatives in this area who are saying, listen, we've got to hammer down on these frivolous lawsuits and get rid of them. And I have a hard time getting behind that. I think essentially when they say we have to get rid of these things, they're essentially saying we've got to take the power away from the community and individual people serving as jurors to make the decision as to what a case is worth. Otherwise, like you said, if there's 12 people from the community that make a decision that this case is worth a certain amount of money, that case is worth that amount of money, and it's not frivolous. And so that's, trying to take that away is just something I can't really get behind. I think about, there's a mediator down in Atlanta that I use quite a bit. He does a fantastic job on all the cases that I put in front of him. And he likes to tell his story to my clients when we're in mediation. He talks about juries, and he says, listen, if we go get 12 strangers from outside right now and bring them in here and set them at this table, and we try to get them to decide where we're going to go for lunch, you're going to get 10 to 12 different answers from everyone of them, right? You're not going to get 12 people to agree on having pizza versus hamburgers. And now you want to take your case and put it in front of 12 strangers that you've never met that are supposed to be unbiased, and you want them to agree on a number to award you in your case. The chances of 12 random people agreeing on a frivolous number is exactly 0%. It's never going to happen. You're going to put it in front of these 12 strangers. You're going to give them the evidence as you have it. Defense counsel has the opportunity to present their evidence as they have it. They're going to have everything they need to make a decision, and those 12 people are going to come together with a number that they think appropriately compensates somebody. So there's no way to say that number is frivolous.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. To piggyback on that, we go to great extremes to evaluate a case.
Yeah.
Each case has a mind of its own, different injuries, different factors that are involved, and we just thoroughly evaluate that. And we take pride in that. We're not here to assign astronomical numbers when it's not appropriate. We want to present legitimate figures to the insurance company based on the factors, treatment, the period of time they're in pain, the loss, and what kind of care that they're going to need in the future. And so that is not frivolous. We know that evaluation, that time, that care, we want to present a number that's an actual correct number based on what happened in their case.
No, I've never really sat down and calculated it, but I can almost guarantee you I spend as much time, if not more, trying to determine what my ask is going to be as I do just about any other aspect of the claim, whether that's reading medical records or putting together a demand package or drafting a lawsuit. I sit there and think about what is an appropriate number and how can I justify that number.
Right.
You hear a lot of attorneys that just say, oh, well, take your medical bills and multiply times 2, and that's a good settlement. That's lazy lawyering. I like to actually sit down and figure out a way to give, like you said, the insurance company or the jury eventually a number, and this is how we got to that number. Let's break it down X, Y, and Z. You give them something tangible to hold on to like that where they can actually see and they're not just pulling stuff out of thin air. Mm-hmm. And I think it helps a lot. Makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
And another point, talking about the big mass marketers that I want people to be aware of and to stay away from is if anybody ever tells you, hey, give us a call, find out what your case is worth, you should just see red flags go up immediately. Yeah. If anybody's willing to just pick up the telephone and talk to you for a minute and then give you a value of your case or an evaluation of that case, I think they're probably either lying to you or they're a psychic, and I don't believe psychic exists. So, the alternative there's not saying a whole lot. It's almost impossible, and you and I talk about this a lot. It's impossible for somebody to call you and say, hey, I got rear-ended over on Interstate 20. My neck's been hurting. I've gone to the hospital. I've gone to a chiropractor. What's my case worth? Sure, you do this long enough, you could probably get an idea of a range, but there's so many different things that are going to go into effect that every single person heals differently. Treatment across the board, whether it's a hospital in Forsyth County or a hospital in DeKalb County or a hospital down in Macon, every one of them build differently. There's a set of codes of how much these things are going to cost. Missed time from work carries different values. People make different amounts of money. There's just so many different things that you have to consider. So if anybody tells you they can talk to you on the phone and evaluate your case, I suggest you run. Just out.
Right. Does that mean you hate it when I ask you what a case is worth during budget meetings?
No, not at all. I mean, like I said, privately, I think when somebody calls me, when they hire us, I sit down and I take the facts that I have, and I like to sort of play a game with myself where I'll write down a number where I think the case is going to sell. Maybe a range, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, somewhere in that range. And I like to come back to that number when the case is over and just see how close I got. Not because it means anything, but it's just good practice for me to see, okay, what moved the needle on this one? I thought it was worth $50,000. It ended up going to $150,000. What pushed it up, that extra value? Or sometimes I thought it was worth 50 and we got 7.
Right. Why
did it drop so low? I want to know those things as well. And almost kind of like we planned it here, I think that's a pretty good segue into our third misconception, which is that anybody with a law license can handle a personal injury claim. This is something I talked about in the last podcast that I sort of struggled with in the beginning of my career because I didn't necessarily want to do personal injury. I was doing a bunch of different things. Took me a minute to sort of buy into the personal injury world, but I'm glad that I did. I mean, I guess when you think about it from a literal standpoint, anybody with a law license can technically handle a personal injury claim.
Right.
It's legal. They're allowed to do that. But that doesn't necessarily mean they should, or if they do that, they're going to handle it well. And what I tell people all the time is, look, we both went to law school, right? I took criminal law because it was required of us to take criminal law as a class. But if you get a DUI, or if you get arrested from roughing up your girlfriend's boyfriend, you don't want to call me because I'm probably going to get you in more trouble than you're already in. I don't know where to begin, wouldn't know who to talk to, wouldn't know the documents to file. I know nothing about criminal law other than what you should and shouldn't do just on a moral standpoint. Same thing applies to personal injury. It's all I do. So if you get in a car wreck, you want to call somebody, then that's all that they do. I know so many people that practice in, say, divorce, family law, or they practice in wills and estates, probate law, real estate law, whatever. They know the law, but they're too busy to do all of it, and they can't focus on any of it specifically. So that's why I say call a personal injury lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely. I can attest to that a bit. When I started practicing, I would say it's the saying, a jack of all trades is a master of none.
Yeah.
Did a little bit of everything, probate, real estate, civil litigation, and then personal injury. And you spend so much time jumping from one to the other that you're not necessarily able to focus on just one.
Sure.
That's why I chose to focus on personal injury and make it my practice. But, this old lawyer named Ben Musgrove told me that in today's world, specialty is necessary.
Yeah.
And so I've taken that to heart.
No, it is. And I was told that by an old lawyer as well. I won't say his name, embarrass him because he actually is old. I'm not that old. But the specialty allows you to do different things. Like, let's say you hire the lawyer that does family law or divorces, and they want to try your personal injury case because it's clear liability. Somebody hit you. They're at fault. They're going to have to pay out. Their insurance company's coming on, out for you. But, you have to look at it and say, okay, are they capable of trying this case or handling this case? Do they have enough bandwidth, or do they have too many other divorces going on where they can't really focus in on this? And if they accept it anyway, did they make sure that you're getting the right treatment? Did they make sure you're going to see the right doctors? So many times you get somebody who comes in after having hired a different attorney and let them go ultimately, and they just didn't get the orthopedic treatment that they needed. And now it's been 6 months. And it's like, well, anything could have happened in that 6 months. The insurance company's going to balk at it. There's been too big of a gap. Had you had an attorney on this that knew what they were doing to begin with, they could have told you, here's what you should do. Here's where you should go. If you're hurting, go see this guy. Do a little bit of physical therapy if they recommend it. Maybe you need injections. Ask them about that. Different things that they could sort of point them in that direction. And did that attorney know how to handle the different buckets we talked about? Did they know how to go jump in the liability bucket, the UM bucket, the health insurance bucket? Or did they just send a letter to State Farm for the at-fault party and say, well, we got $25,000. That's the best we're going to do. In that case, you may have missed out on significant amounts of money.
Yeah.
Did they know how to go talk to Medicare, Medicaid, the health insurance companies, and find out if there are any subrogation liens? Did they make sure all your medical bills were satisfied at the end of the claim? Just so many different things that you learn when you specialize in personal injury. But that's what we do. Excuse me. you and I have dedicated our time to this craft. We've developed the proper networks. We've created the protocols here in the office so that we run smoothly, efficiently, and I think that we maximize the results for our clients every single time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that covers a lot of the misconceptions. But it should be obvious that a successful and adequate personal injury attorney does a few things. One, for you as an individual, get an attorney that personalizes on personal injury. Let them turn the stones for you and find funding where they can to go deeper, to look for those additional insurance policies that may not just be automatically apparent. And that takes skill and time, having done this. And then ensure that they do their due diligence and find a number that's not frivolous. They're not just trying to throw a ridiculous number out there that's not appropriate.
Don't make $1 million demand when it's worth $10,000.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, I think that's I think it's a perfect close. I really do. Let's wrap this thing up, Maren. So we greatly appreciate everybody tuning in for our second episode here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Certainly, we intend to come back to you with a third just as soon as possible. Until then, and as always, if we can help you in any way, give us a call, 470-347-1515, or you can find us online at bettismusgrove.com. We're on Facebook at Bettis Musgrove, and we're on Instagram at Bettis_Musgrove. So go check us out on all the platforms. Drop us a line if you like this. If there's anything you want us to talk about, anything you'd like to know a little bit more about, certainly we'll take it up. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and God bless.